Welcome to video number 5 in 301 Job Search Strategies. In the last video, I asked you to take a moment and create a journal entry asking how you might dress to impress at an interview. And we'll have an opportunity to talk much more about this in person at our mock interview and fashion show, so we'll keep this video quite simple and concise for now. But hopefully you had a chance to consider a few things. For example, the formalness of your attire needs to be much more significant in an interview than it will probably ever be on the job itself. For men, this means things like ties, dress shirts, and a sport coat or blazer, and a pair of dress shoes. For women, you have more choices: dresses, skirts, and blouses, and again, you can wear a suit. But some things are not going to be okay, like golf shirts, sweatshirts, athletic wear, running shoes, or jeans. Even though you might wear those things every single day when you actually have the job, this is your opportunity to show people that you understand this social code called professionalism. So you have to dress in a formal way. And by the way, it is possible to be a bit too formal. For example, I had somebody once show up wearing a tuxedo, and that's just a little bit beyond. Make sure that you're not dressing like you're going out to a wedding or out for a night of dancing with your friends. There's a difference between looking good at a club and looking good at a job interview, which tends to be far more conservative. Of course, make sure your hygiene is on point. Body odor and bad breath, for example, are things I have seen in too many interviews. But there are some things that might be more subtle. For example, it might be a good time to ask your friends and family whether or not your hairstyle is very current or neat, whether it suits you. I've had a few people who wondered why they weren't getting jobs, and in a few cases, it was probably because people were more concerned with growing their hair out as long as they possibly could, rather than with looking particularly stylish or fashionable. And neatness also extends to our clothing. You might think that nobody will notice that spaghetti stain or that little hole in your shirt was created by a moth or the missing button or wrinkle, but they probably will. I've worked with people who rated what you wore to your interview with equal importance to your interview itself or your resume. And remember the social codes of where you're working, because they override what I've talked about so far. For example, I've been asked by people whether or not it would be inappropriate to show that they had a tattoo or a piercing, or whether or not they had their bare arms showing at an interview. And it really comes down to where you work. If you're going to be working in a facility that extends out into the community, like outreach or a youth facility, then there's a pretty good chance that those tattoos or piercings actually communicate relatability and youthfulness, and so they might be considered assets. But if you're going to go work in a more conservative type facility, such as a senior's home, you probably want to tone those down a bit. Similarly, you want to think about the language you use. We tend not to use very much slang or street language in most of our interviews. Again, though, if you're working in a place that serves people in the street and you can communicate that you understand what those language choices are, it can be important. And we're going to talk later on about the importance of understanding sort of the jargon or terminology that your employer might want you to use. I interviewed somebody once who thought that supported people should be called psychos. So you can imagine that I didn't need to have very much time with her in an interview before I realized that she was just not tuned in to the values of our organization. So we're going to move on and get you to do another blog. This time I'd like you to think about your resume and cover letter. Take a moment to answer these 4 questions. What's the purpose of a cover letter? How is it different from a resume? What should a cover letter include? And what should not be in it? Take a moment, blog those, and move on to video number 6.